Yeah. Um, Welcome. I'm Vincent Morfuni, and on behalf of the Australian Calabrese Cultural Association, I'd like to welcome you to this edition of the program Sono Calabrese, which is a series of conversations with members of our community who discuss aspects of their lives, both here and in Italy. Our guest today is Giuseppe or Joe Cossari, who, amongst other things, has been a mayor of the city of Knox and has stood as a candidate for Oceania in the Italian Parliament. And we're very honoured to have him as our guest today. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time to have a chat with us.
It's a great pleasure for me to have a chat with you, Vincent. We've known each other for quite a while. But you're talking about my history in this country. In fact, I was born in Calabria in a small town called Borgia, after Lucrezia Borgia, the famous Borgias in Rome, the famous Pope, the only town in the world that carries their name. It's not a great name as far as history goes concerned, but it's the name of a city or a town, as we would call it, in about 25 k's on the beachfront of Catanzaro.
And you would say that Borgia is not as corrupt as the Borgia
certainly is not corrupt.
Yeah.
As far as I'm aware, of course.
Yeah, well, and so you were born in Borgia, and did you have siblings?
I have siblings here. Oh, sorry. Yes, we're four brothers.
Yeah. All right. And your dad, he migrated to Australia?
Yeah, he migrated in 1952 to Australia for the lack of unemployment opportunities in our hometown. It's after the Second World War. Italy was practically destroyed by everybody, and there was no jobs. And Dad thought to himself, either I go to Argentina or Australia. Thank God he picked Australia.
Yeah. And you would have been, what, 5 at the time?
No, I was 8.5 years old when I arrived here in Melbourne. I arrived in Australia.
Yeah. What about when your father left Colombia?
I was only about 5 years old, thereabouts.
And do you have a recollection of his leaving?
I remember him leaving. It's almost like a dream. I remember his brothers, my uncles, were talking about their brother who had gone to Australia as a young kid. I remember those things. Yeah. And now as I'm getting older, I virtually remember what my grandfather used to tell me in my younger days.
Yeah. Yeah. And in terms of your siblings, where are you in the hierarchy? Are you the eldest or youngest?
I'm the eldest of the others, yes.
Right, you're the eldest. And do you have a recollection of missing the presence of your father for the period that he was absent?
I had that recollection, recollection, because I'm thinking about I'm missing Dad. But, you know, as young kids, we were just nuisance all over town with kids, you know, we all get together and play around. So it was a bit of a distraction. But at the end of the day, you did, as anyone would say, is that you'd miss your parents. And
that's a pretty formative period of your life too, isn't it? 5 years of age, and
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And as you're growing, 3 years later, inverted commas, I met my father, obviously, because he worked at General Motors and went to South Australia, as far as I'm aware, and eventually he gained enough funds to pay, because we had to pay for our trip to Australia. And he paid, and we arrived in Australia.
And where did the family first settle in Australia?
Well, first of all, the first recollection on the ship, that it was called a Neptune, when it left Sicily. We went to Port Said, and I saw people of different colours, if I may say so, and saw my first pineapple in that case. But we arrived, we did the trip from there to Colombo, to Jakarta, Perth. My first stepping in Australia was in Perth.
Yeah, but that's not where your father was living, though, was it? I thought he was living in New South Wales.
Yeah, but I'm just giving you the idea of the trip that I had from Perth down to Melbourne, Sydney. Sydney is where we arrived. And I remember the strange town that I was looking at from the ship was There's a lot of trees all over the place. And remember the Sydney Harbour Bridge.
And how long did you live in Sydney?
In Sydney, we lived approximately, I can't remember exactly, probably about a couple of years.
And then I understand you went to northern Queensland.
Correct, because what happened was Dad was working again for General Motors, and there was a layoff, and Dad obviously was the newest there, and he was laid off. There was no jobs around, and he decided to go to North Queensland and became a cane cutter.
Yeah. And what town in northern Queensland?
Innisfail. We arrived at a place called Innisfail. We're still there. And Innisfail, incidentally, for those who might be listening to us, there's a statue to the Italian cane cutters, and I was there at the inauguration. And sat on the banks of Johnson River. Yeah. So we landed. We arrived in Innisfail. From Innisfail, we went to a place called Moresby, township of Moresby. And Dad was cane cutting in a place called Cowley, just south of Moresby.
And is that where you had your primary education in northern Queensland?
Yeah, between Moresby and Marillion.
Yeah. And to what level?
I just finished high school.
Right. And how long did your family stay in Queensland?
Well, in Queensland we stayed for a considerable time, because Dad approximately was about, he came for 8-9 years. Then we moved down to Shepparton.
Tobacco grower?
No, out at the fruit, because as Dad's worked all over the place, he met these people, and he met this gentleman who was a compadre eventually, Scarpari, Luigi, and he had an orchard in Kyabram.
Right. And
from Kyabram, Dad became a share farmer with Mr. Silverstein, a Jewish gentleman, and eventually Dad purchased that orchard called Shamrock Orchard down the road to Chura.
Yeah. So by that time you would have been what, 17, 18?
Yeah, I was that age.
And were you working at that time?
Well, I've done all sorts of jobs in my younger days. I've picked cotton, picked tobacco, picked fruit, worked for the Chura butter factory. I moved to Sydney on my way back from picking cotton, and I met my wife Rosa in those days. I fell in love with her. I was there, but her family was part of my hometown, and their name is Vallejo. And eventually I got married to her, and I've been married to her for about 50 odd years.
So it was a good move to go to Sydney.
Yeah, it was a good move. But I tell you what happened, and people might be surprised. Because my father-in-law worked for the Border Works in Sydney, and I got a job there, and as a team leader. And eventually I became a crane driver driving a D7, a huge machine. And I loved it, pushing the dirt. Wow, it was really cool on the mountains. And we worked on the treatment works at Malabar. And I became union rep for about 450 people. And I took people to strike and everything else with it. My colleagues who are on the opposite side of my political belief, I would be surprised to know that's who I was.
So you, at that stage, I take it, you were very pro-worker.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, but that indicates that you were interested in politics from a fairly early age.
I certainly was. I've always been interested in politics.
And at that time, were you a member of the Labor Party?
And I wasn't. I wasn't. No, I went
to
a Blacktown Labor Party meeting, and the reason why I didn't become was I was confronted by a gentleman, an elderly gentleman, and he sort of was anti-immigrant sort of thing, yeah. And I'm not going to be with these guys here who don't like us foreigners.
Well, I'm surprised that as a union rep, you weren't virtually obliged to be a member of the party.
Well, I don't think they could persuade me to do so.
Yeah. And for how long were you the union?
I was there for about 18 months or thereabouts.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, see, history and fate. In the meantime, my younger brother, who's now passed away, left Shepparton and came to Melbourne, and he worked in a pizza shop. Then he decided to open his own pizza shop in Ringwood. And he was so busy, and he goes, Joe, come down and give us a hand, Barbara. Look, I'm happy where I am, and whatever. But anyhow, I came down.
Yeah.
And then
was your wife born in Calabria or born in Australia?
She was born in Calabria. I think she was about 4.5 years when she got here.
Right. But you didn't know her in Calabria?
Oh, absolutely not.
No. Okay. And so that you've done a variety of jobs, and you ultimately came down and worked in a pizza parlor with your brother.
Right. And the other thing is my pizza parlor, although I don't like it, in the sense when you come to Australia or move to another country, everybody tries to change your surname. It's my name is, as you're aware, you said it correctly, is Cossari, yeah?
Mm.
The sign writer called it Cossari with an A.
Oh.
And now the sign was up there because we didn't check out, so it's stuck.
So it's Cossari pizza.
Cossari's pizza in Ringwood, yes.
Cossari pizza. Well,
Yeah.
you should have changed the sign. It's
Sorry, in those days I didn't think of it. We're ready to open up and promote business and whatever.
Yeah.
So I left it at Cossari, and that's it, and stuck. And people 30 years later still talk about Cossari's pizza.
Yeah. And all right. And whilst in Victoria, I understand that at one stage you did join a political party, the Liberal Party, is that right?
Yeah, I did join the Liberal Party, yes.
Yeah. And in fact, you saw pre-selection, didn't you?
Yes, I saw pre-selection.
And how did you go?
Oh, I didn't go too good.
Yeah. And why do you think that was?
I don't really know. I think the Labor Party has been more towards multiculturalism than the Liberal Party. And therefore, I think that might have been the case. I can't put my hands on it, but it might have been the case.
What interests me is that you would have known that in a sense, as you put it, the Labor Party was more interested in multiculturalism than the Liberals.
Well, the reason why
would you join the Liberals?
Well, I tell you why. I belonged to, in those days, I was nominated responsabile per il Comitato Tricolore per Italiani nel Mondo, under the guidance of the late Honourable Mirko Tremaglia. And while I was involved with the Comitato Tricolore, I asked him, who should I follow from there? And he suggested the Liberal Party.
What would he know about conditions in Australia?
The Liberal Party is more to the right rather than to the left.
All right. So you effectively what was the party in Italy again? The Tricolore.
And the organisation overseas is called il Comitato Tricolore per Italiani nel Mondo. It's a branch. It was a branch of Alleanza Nazionale.
And so that was a right-wing party in Italy.
That's right.
And when you say he suggested, do you think it was more of a dictate rather than a suggestion? In other words,
no. He was very friendly, and he says, "Look, I think the best way is because we are on the same sort of politics, and if you're going to represent us, we got to be coherent to what we're doing."
Well, I would have thought that the Liberal Party would have disagreed vehemently with him, that the ideals of the Liberal Party were the same as the Alleanza Nazionale.
But listen, let me tell you this: if you're in a river and there's a swollen river and a small branch floats past, you try to grab it and survive. I wanted to be somebody that would fight for the rights of immigrants, specifically Italians. I saw my parents, how they went through, and everybody else in those ages. So I thought, I now understand their language. What a better way if I have a backing or have a group behind me, and to raise issues and maintain, perhaps keep the Italian a flame alive.
And which branch of the Liberal Party did you join?
I joined in the eastern suburbs.
Right. And are you still a member?
I'm now a member of no political party.
Right. When did you stop being a member of the Liberals?
I would have been quite a few years ago.
Right. And when you stood for pre-selection, did anyone have a word with you and tell you that you might be wasting your time?
No. It was, with all fairness, they look, it's your choice, you run, and met a number of people. Nobody gave me an indication yes or no. And I thought I'll have a go at it. It's like everything else. You have a go. If you get there, you get there. If you don't, you don't.
Yeah.
I held no, grievances with the result. Okay, big deal.
How many times did you stand for pre-selection?
I think it's once.
Right. All right. But you're also involved in local politics, weren't you? You were involved in the city of Knox.
Yeah, I know. First of all, let's go back to Ringwood. In Ringwood, I still have a lot of friends, and I became president of the Ringwood Chamber of Commerce. We invited the Italian Chamber of Commerce, I think nobody else ever invited an Italian Chamber of Commerce to participate in English or an Australian sort of a Chamber of Commerce like the one in Ringwood. And the current elected representative, Calabrese, was the president of the Italian Chamber of Commerce in Melbourne. I invited him there, and I invited the Consul General. I've done a couple of times to promote the Italian idea, yeah? But gone back, I had a friend, he was a good friend, and he was involved in the Ringwood Chamber of Commerce, and he says, Joe, run for council. I go, come on, we've got better things to do. He goes, Joe, run for council. I thought, okay, I will. I threw my thing in, and then it was in a time that I went to see my dad up in Shepparton. During the elections, I did very little electioneering, and I get a call for the returning officer, Mr. Cossari, you should be coming down here. I said, why? He says, come down. So I rolled up here, and here I was. I won the seat.
You've been elected.
Yeah.
But in local politics, you hold a unique distinction, don't you? Because you were elected mayor for two councils or two shires.
Yeah, well, I ran, there's a few issues. I became mayor of the city of Ringwood, or Maroondah as it's called. And from there, I then did my stint, and I thought, enough. I've had enough of being in council. Yeah, I've done a lot of things for the community, but the results are there. And then, unbeknown to me, another friend from a nearby municipality, which is Knox, says, we need you to come to Knox, Anyhow, they're not really. Anyhow, they come in, they persuaded me, and I won again.
But you were elected mayor in the same year for two councils.
No. I ran, that's another story. I ran for two councils consecutively, Knox and Maroondah. The law was changed because there's the Cossari amendment in Hansard, that I was the first guy, because I thought I've been a challenger for a lot of things. And I said, if I got to pay rates where I've got property, then I should be able to run. So I challenged, because I live in Knox, so I challenged it. So I ran concurrently for two councils. I lost Knox originally by 32 votes. So I would have been elected for two councils at the same time. And then they changed the rule.
And then they had to change the law. And you're also been involved in what might be called the Italian political scene. As you say, you were from very early on a member of Alleanza Nazionale.
Yes.
And you actually stood as the Oceania.
Yes, I did.
Candidate for the Italian Parliament.
Yes.
Yes. On how many occasions?
Two occasions.
Right. And was that always with the Alleanza Nazionale? Or
no, because it became the freedom of the Popolo della Libertà. It was the group of political parties, Berlusconi and Alleanza Nazionale joined one group, and I ran as that. I was their candidate.
Okay, so that was at the time of Berlusconi.
Yes.
Yeah. And how did you go on that first occasion?
I did reasonably well, but not as well I thought I would be.
Right. And the second occasion that you stood for?
Yeah, I ran with the Monty group.
And that's also a on the right side of
almost
politics,
on the right, in the centre,
always
more
on
or
the
less.
right.
Yeah.
And
that was a disappointment for me. And because I would have won the last election that I stood, I lost by 729 votes over 2,000 voters. The problem that I had, and this is still, you know, we can go down, I don't want to complain, so let's go straight to the point. There was a strike called in South Africa, the poster strike. And incidentally, it was after the ballots went out and before the ballots were coming in, they went on strike. Of all the ballots that came in, I won the seat of South Africa. I beat Marco Ferri. But in a total number, I lost by 729 votes. If there wasn't a strike, that strike wasn't called to some unknown organization in Italy who decided to do so, because South Africa supports more the center than the left. So therefore, I would have won by a couple of thousand votes.
What interests me, though, is the very concept of someone permanently resident in Australia getting elected to the Italian Parliament. To me, it's an absurdity that the Italian Parliament would have.
You can say the same thing
for,
in Australia. You can say the same thing for Australia. Somebody who lives in Victoria gets elected to the federal parliament.
No, but at least they're in the continent. They're in the nation of Australia, right?
Italy's got millions of Italian citizens across the planet.
That's
and
true.
They should have a voice and they have the right to vote. As Australian Italians or Australians living in Italy are entitled to vote.
But my point is, why not then stand as a candidate in one of the parties in Italy, right? And if the Italian citizens living abroad can vote, but they're voting for someone who's actually resident in Italy.
No, but the idea is through Mirko Tremaglia that we should have a representation. The Italian citizens should be a representation. So it's been divided in electoral zones. Yeah, mine was Oceania. Okay, and we do have 2 elected representatives.
Yeah, I know that. But I'm asking you.
Yeah, but my view is I'm convinced that if I'm elected for this electorate called Australia, okay, then I know what the Australian Italian community needs and how I can help, in this case down here, even the country who I'm a guest in, which is Australia. Okay, and Australia is in a lucky position because if it was working well, it has 2 parliamentarians representing in the European Union who could speak on behalf of Australia in the European Union.
But the reality is that once you get into the Italian Parliament, that Parliament is concerned predominantly with what's occurring in Italy. It doesn't really care very much about what's happening in Australia or South Africa, the United States, Canada. From my perspective, I think they would think that those people are doing pretty well.
Yeah, they have the numbers, obviously. Yeah. But if you look at it, and this is where I'm unhappy, on the first election when my opponents won, and I said to my group in Italy, Australia holds the balance of power. And they didn't believe me. But at the end of the day, the PD won government in Italy because of the elected representatives in overseas, which is in Australia. So you do have a power.
But what benefits? I mean, the system...
It all depends. Listen, if you're peddling, it all depends what sort of peddler you are.
Well, no, but I mean, I think it's a bit more complex than that. The system of electing representatives from overseas to the Italian Parliament has been in force now for some years.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'd like you to tell anyone who's listening or watching one benefit that has actually flowed to Australia as a consequence of having 2 representatives in the Italian Parliament.
Let's go back to something we all know. You can go to a restaurant and there's a guy called Joe or Vincent who's a chef, okay, calls himself a chef. And then he brings out food that's not even Italian. So the quality of the people who've been elected have been not involved or haven't had the capacity to be involved in, even in Australia, talking to the local parliamentarians, the Australian government. What benefits could they?
I've got to disagree with you on that, Joe, because if you go back, who was the first representative?
Who was the first?
Yeah, Nino Randazzo.
Randazzo and Marco Fedi.
And some would say that Randazzo, whilst he was in Australia, would be very well attuned to the conditions in Australia.
Yes, he was called the sleeping senator.
Well, I don't know what he was called, but maybe what I'm putting to you is that it doesn't really matter who the person is. Once they get into that system and they get into the Italian parliament, then literally they're swallowed up, because they're one or two people in, it used to be 600. I think they're going to reduce the number, but in actual fact, their effectiveness, my view is negligible.
I'm not quite sure. You know, when I was elected as mayor, yeah, I thought, oh, whatever. But when I got in there, eventually I fought and did, and I got, and so it was up to me to do it. Have they done anything like that? I'm not quite sure. I don't want to pick on my adversaries or my opposition. I'm not here to do that, because I even congratulated them for winning as a normal person. Yeah. But if political minded, I think they didn't do a good job, and they're still not doing a good job.
Yeah. Well, I think we may differ is that I think that the system is designed to ensure that they can't do an effective job. I don't know what a good job is, but I don't think they can do an effective job. And surely, even if you'd been elected, you would have had some conflicts. For example, if you look at the policies towards migration, as an immigrant, how would you feel about the policies that some of the right-wing parties in Italy were pushing?
Okay, if we're going down the track,
yeah.
If you come into Australia, and we came to Australia, we had a passport, we complied with everything else. The government says of the day, you can come in. My view with Giorgia Meloni in Italy, and she is right, you know, we just can't open the door for everybody to come in. Otherwise, come in all, millions of you. They can't cope with these people. There's got to be an orderly immigration, not irregular immigration where people you can't cope with it. And you're arriving in Italy, and this is what I don't like, and I'm in favor of Giorgia Meloni. They get these people to work in the fields for peanuts, okay? And I'm not happy about that. And so therefore, my view is, if you're an immigrant and you have your papers and it's got to be controlled in the sense, how many can we take, okay? Then I'm all in favor, but I'm not in favor. I've seen these young girls from Africa being prostituted in the streets of Rome or whatever, and exploited by everybody. That's not immigration. No, that's slavery, and I do not accept that.
No, that's true. No one would be in favour of exploitation, but equally, it's very difficult for someone who's a refugee to turn up with duly stamped papers.
Okay.
And a lot of these people are obviously refugees, in my view.
Are they, or are they being used by other people? The question is here is, Vincent, if I might add, and this is a sore point for everybody, is how many people can arrive in Italy every day, every year, for how long? How many millions? To me, I say, do you want 10 million to come in? At the end of 10 million, no more. Okay? I mean, let's face the reality. I got my relatives in Calabrese, like these people wandering the streets and haven't got a job. They haven't got a job, they be exploited, so they steal. If you're hungry, you do anything. I don't want this sort of immigration. I'm not in favor of that immigration. I see and I read, as you know, I'm quite well versed in the Italian politics or in the system. You know, Artigiano, there's these people working for nothing. Yeah, they got nothing. And I'm saying, do we want that? No, we are creating slaves.
No, I don't think that they're working for nothing.
They're working for peanuts, yeah?
Well, Well, you've got a similar, or you had a similar situation here in Australia, where people who overstayed their visa were working off the books, and everybody knew that there were a large number of people.
Haven't we done something about it?
Well, what's happened is COVID has got rid of that problem.
Yeah, but okay, but I know when we're on
because
the
they've
orchard,
all had to go.
when I was at the orchard, and we had an orchard, as you are aware,
Yeah,
I never underpaid anybody. Absolutely never.
yeah.
And
Well,
so,
and that's true, and I guess it ultimately does depend on the individual.
yes,
And if the individual chooses not to exploit, then it doesn't matter where they come from; they won't be exploited.
no, absolutely not.
That's not the way that most systems operate. People choose to get as much advantage as they
But
can.
imagine what would happen if there was 1 million immigrants arriving in Australia at once.
Yeah,
It'd be a disaster. I think there needs to be some sort of
yeah,
control what happens. Otherwise, open the doors for everybody.
yeah. Well, and
And then we end up like where the towns they come from.
well, I think that's really what lies behind the restrictive policies, isn't it? This notion that you lose identity, you lose sovereignty, and ultimately you lose control.
Well, okay, as far as Italy's concerned, is I think the Italians, the general population, are welcoming and they're but in their means. But I cannot have millions of people or hundreds of thousands of people who obviously are hungry. They got to do, and there's crime going on, and I don't blame them. If I was hungry, I'd do the same thing. So if we allow them to come in, we're going to make sure that they have a decent place to live and there's a job. Otherwise, we're creating slaves, and we don't want to go back to the dark ages.
You know, countries use this notion of criminality, but the reality is there's crime in every country.
Oh yeah, but you know, if you're hungry, my view is if you're hungry, you'll steal a loaf of bread.
Some people rely on crime to lead a very, very wealthy lifestyle.
No, okay, I'm not saying, listen, I'm not blaming the immigrants for violence. All I'm saying is, if you're hungry, you'll break the law because you need to survive.
Well, and maybe the solution then is to have a system in place to make sure that most of the people aren't hungry.
That's right.
The motivation.
Right.
So you would still, therefore, despite the fact that you've stood twice as a candidate and not won, you still believe that the system of electing candidates or representatives from outside Italy to the Italian Parliament is a good one.
I certainly believe, because we're talking about representation.
Yeah.
Okay, and you know, in democracy, you're going to have representation, and therefore, one of Italy's or I call them right wing, but we're not. Okay, decided that the Italians obviously should have a voice, and they elected democratically. Sorry,
why do you say that the party isn't right wing? I mean,
do we call the Liberal Party right wing as well?
Sorry,
there's two different parties there at the moment, or there's hundreds of different parties. We maintain one line, they maintain another line. There's the opposition and there's a government. So you need the opposition. Remember, Vincent, since you're a lawyer, without hell, there wouldn't be a Catholic church. So you're going to have good and bad to fight and then arrive at a compromise.
There's no issue about there needing to be an opposition, but my point was that Meloni openly admits that she's on the right side of politics, the right-wing side of politics.
She represents Fratelli d'Italia, which is a former Alleanza Nazionale.
Right, exactly.
And with all honesty, if we went to an election today, the government would have a liberal style, as we call them in Australia, government in Italy.
Well, who knows? But some would say that
there's no doubt at the moment, my side of politics have the majority. Fratelli d'Italia is the biggest political party in Italy.
Yeah. Well, as I understand it, even in Calabria,
Calabria is now run by. Let's make it clear: is Forza Italia, Fratelli d'Italia, and La Lega. And there, as soon as I got in there, as we go back to our home, is they're wanting change. They don't want to go to this old style of doing things. I had a chat this morning in Italy, and they kept saying, Joe, we need to change the whole system, even the system overseas, representation overseas.
But the need for change has been espoused every election. I mean, what is it, the Tricolore or Cinque Stelle, I think it was.
No, Cinque Stelle, excuse me.
Let's
not mix them up, yeah?
No, Cinque Stelle.
That's right.
That was a movement that was based on fundamental change to the system.
And then they fell in the trap of going on the opposition. They could have come with us.
Well, that's because there's not much point being in politics if you don't have power. And you'd appreciate that, wouldn't you?
But of course. But if they joined us, we would have been in power.
Yeah. But my point is that even that group has not been able to radically change the system and the way that it's been operating for a long time.
Well, let's look at this way. There's a number of parties there forming government. Actually, what's the name? Forza Italia is with the government at the moment. The Lega is in there as well. And we, Giorgia Meloni, we're on our own. Yes? Okay. How do you change? You got to change the mentality. But if you don't believe in that there needs a change, or there could be a change, a possibility of a change, then let's not having elections at all. What's the point? What's the point of being in Parliament anyhow?
Oh, no, clearly. You can,
so you need to have these things there, whether we like them or not. You need them to be there. And it's the people who make the decision. And not you and I making that decision. It's the people that vote. And talking about voting now, if I might change a bit, we just had recently a commoners election. It's like a council of overseas.
Before we get to that, because I just want to, one of the intriguing things to me about the Italian political scene is that in Calabria, the right wing.
Let's call them Liberal and Labor, okay? Let's don't go right wing and that.
I don't think that they equate all that well. But my point is, you had a fellow there who was effectively saying that Calabria was a drain on the north. That's a Lega.
That's right, the Lega. Right? I understand
and yet
that.
The Lega did exceptionally well in the voting in Calabria.
That's right.
But so how do you explain that?
But they're not pinking like what's to say in English? You're nitpicking all over the place. The Lega says, I can say these guys that got elected here are just a useless piece of nothing. Okay. So that's what they said. The Lega says, oh, these Italians up south are not doing enough. The fact is that southern Italy was the real Italy in the first place. And Italy got its name from Calabria.
But my point is, it must say something about the attitude of the people who are living there, that despite the criticisms that were made about the Calabrese,
Vincent, they had enough.
They still supported the Lega.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the Lega now is calling for change.
Yeah, well, if it can. Now, you mentioned before Comitas, and yes. In fairness to you, you were a member of Comitas in the 80s, weren't you?
I was. I did a stint in Comitas years ago. I don't remember when it was, but I got up. Let's put it down as it is. The majority of the people who were in the Comitas at those days, which is also today, we never wanted to listen to Joe Cossari, although I've got a vast experiences. I've been mayor of 2 major cities, and we've had the best advisors that money can buy in local government. Okay, and I come from that background. I did 20 years of it. Nobody wanted to listen. The first thing they say, he's a fascist. What's good fascism going to do with the Comitas? This is where it's ridiculous.
You were a member in 2005, weren't you, of Comitas?
Sorry?
In 2005, you were a member of Comitas.
2005, I don't remember, but okay, 2005.
Yeah. Now, and when you say people refuse to listen to you, and that might be true, but do you think that there could also be an element that you were not able to persuade them?
No, they were even if it was right. Look, I'll give you an example. I put a bet actually on Marco Fedi when they named Piazza Italia in Argyle, and I argued, okay, we can't accept Piazza Italia in Argyle. It's Piazza Italia, and he goes to me, "Oh, don't worry about it. It'll change." I said, "Marco, you'll never change. because place names are ours. You've got to fight it now, not tomorrow. It's now about 20 years later. It's still Piazza Italia Argol, and nobody really knows Piazza Italia anyhow. So they're not listening.
For how long were you on Comites?
I think 4 years, I think.
Right.
I don't remember exactly.
Right. And from what you're telling me, I infer that you would agree that it was almost a wasted 4 years because you weren't able to achieve.
As a single person, because they're all from, let's call it left and right, yeah, or Liberal and Labor, okay? Anything you say, and I would have said, they wouldn't agree. Then was Joe Caputo was involved. Okay, I know, Joe Ficata, sorry. And we argued that they had to talk to the City of Melbourne. No, they had to do it. But we were mayors, 2 mayors, okay? Yeah. And we would have talked to the local government better than what they could do. They didn't let us do it.
But that's my point. Comites, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're elected in order to be a communication channel.
That's right.
Between the Italians living in Australia,
in Melbourne,
and the Italian government.
Yeah.
And so presumably whatever shade of politics,
that's right,
they may represent, when they are elected, their goal, as I understand it, should be,
that's right,
the promotion for the benefit of the Italians.
Yes.
And presumably whatever benefits the Italian government may be able to provide,
yeah,
given the information that is provided by Comites. So, but what you're telling me is that the party politics, the individuals, are carried on into the elected body of Comites.
Correct.
Well, that's clearly the fault of the individuals, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. But I gave you the example. I gave you the example that Joe Ficata is from the Labor Party and I'm on the Liberal Party side, but there's 2 councillors who can talk to the council local government because we know how to do it. You don't put somebody else who knows nothing about local government, okay? So you go there and you go, oh, okay, like this. I had a meeting with somebody that's no longer still around, but he wanted to meet the director of Business East because he wanted, okay, this is where it all comes in. The Italians listen carefully. Who are we getting? Who represent us? So I said, okay, not a problem. So I went there, had a meeting, and the guy goes, so who do you represent? In brief, yeah? He says, I represent the region of Rome, for argument's sake, okay? And what's your position? And he goes, I'm like the Premier. Here is a consultore from Lazio to tell us, a person who represents Business East, that he's the Premier. And the guy looks at me and goes, yeah, I thought, what the hell have I done here? It was an embarrassment. And these are the people who want to make decisions.
Well, they're the people that have been elected. But
yes, but I mean, this is what we've got at hand.
Yeah, but
and who wants to listen to a group like that?
Yeah, but I want you to tell us what the actual process of election entails. Am I right? As I understand it, an individual can't stand for Comites. He's got to be a member of a list. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, which is similar to the political system in Italy, where people form lists.
Yeah, a group. I call it list, but yeah, it's a group. You're going to have your group. Yeah. And this is where it's absurd. At the moment, it's getting worse, okay?
No, but just so that I can understand it, and perhaps others, so that I can't nominate as a candidate for Comites.
An individual,
unless I form a group.
Yes.
And am I right that the limit of the group is 16?
That's correct.
Yeah. And
well, you can go as high as 20, but anyhow.
Yeah. And so that group of 16 could be quite disparate. You could have fascists, you could have communists, you could have anarchists, to use political terms.
You could. You could have your local pet in it as well.
Yeah. And then in order to vote, people need to register for voting.
so the process is, if you decide you're an Italian citizen and you're entitled to vote. But in this case down here, they've decided that if you want to vote, participate in an election, you have to register. You got to go on computer, log in and do that. And it's very difficult. I tried and it was a nightmare.
It's not just here, Joe, because I've had complaints from people, even in Switzerland.
Oh, yeah. Not a
United
problem.
States, Argentina. The system is the same. In Argentina, where there are millions.
I agree with you. I'm making a comment about Australia here.
Yeah, but in Australia, I agree. So you've got a system of registration.
Yeah.
And it's got to go through the consul.
Yes.
And then once you're registered, they send out the ballot papers.
Yes.
And you vote in the normal way.
Yeah.
Now, and is there any limit to the number of groups that can be formed to stand for these elections?
You can 1,000 groups.
Yeah. But the last election that you were referring to, there were only 2 groups, weren't there?
Yes.
And you were not on either of them.
Absolutely.
Why not?
Because I thought it was a waste of time and it was almost useless to be there.
Well, if that's what you think, how can you support the system?
No,
you haven't said, let's do away with it.
Vincent, I'm going to say to you is there's 2 lists there. The list has been there for 30 years, okay? And the new list was a newer list with some local people, not young people, there's some young people, but some people have been involved in local politics. The chance of the second list winning was limited. Out of 100%, it would have been about 15, 16%. My beef about that is a number of beefs that.
Well, can we establish one thing though, that your preference would have been for the other list without naming
No. There's an issue here because I am the representative of Fratelli d'Italia.
Yeah.
Okay. And both lists were, let's just say in terms of Australian terms, all Labor Party. Okay. So
that's my point. What does it matter?
It did matter because in one of the lists that wanted me to participate, we're going to put me last on the list of 16 people.
So you did want to go?
I had no intention of running.
Well,
personally.
But surely for them to say that they were going to place you last, you must have indicated some.
Yeah, there were some negotiations with a couple of people, and the idea that was, because it's all a game. The idea was, let's involve Joe Cossari, okay? If we involve him and we put him down to the other end, because he wants to be, which I didn't want to be anyhow. He's got on record that I didn't want to be, and he'll come in, he'll get less votes, okay? And he's been saying, well, he doesn't collect any votes. He can't be the next candidate for the Italian elections. So I said, well, no, you're not going to use me.
All right. If we can just, out of the 16, you can only vote for 4, can't you?
That's right. You can vote. Yeah, that's right.
So therefore, if there are 16 on the list,
and you're down the bottom,
well, you may or may not, depending on how effectively you've campaigned. But my point is, even though it's a list or a group, effectively, they're all competing against each other, aren't they? Because
at the moment,
only 4 can get elected.
The 4 favourites for the winning list got in, they were on the top.
Right. And
then others got elected because the number of votes you get. Okay, so I know Vincent, I'll vote for Vincent, just like that, yeah? And there's 8 that just got some votes to be in the list, and 4 of the opposition.
Yeah, well, this is my point. Why should they be considered the opposition if they're standing for committees in order to advance the interests of the Italians in Australia or in Victoria?
Okay, Vincent, let's go back a bit more. At the previous Commonwealth election, I organised a list of people from all different political backgrounds and all other economic and social backgrounds. Okay, I had from the Lega to Five Star Movement, my side, everybody else, and the Labor Party as well, a whole range of people. I presented my list, and who was with me was Carlo Carli, okay, an opponent, but anyhow, on the same thing. It was accepted by the consul of the day. One day before closure, I was told that my candidates were illegal because they didn't sign before the consul general. Excuse me, I gave you the documentation, you said it was okay, and at the last moment, okay, you disqualify me.
But that's...
And now, so hang on. So we argued, and it was a hoo-ha about it. No, you can't be. And so there was no election. There was an election, and the current list won anyhow. Obviously, there's no competition. And so therefore, my view was, and my personal view has always been, is we need to have a group of people that represent all levels of our community without being political, whatever. And then it could be a committees or an election group of people who could represent the broader community. Using the local government criteria, sort of, yeah?
Yeah.
My view also, before we go any further, because I saw a point here, I would like to see, like you're having local government, in fact, I wrote a piece about local government, is that at the Commons election, if Vincent wants to run, goes in there, signs up, he's a candidate. That's like they do in Australia. You can hundreds of people can run for local government.
Well, that's my point about individuals.
And that's how it should be.
The capacity to run at the moment.
Yeah, and they shouldn't, as long as you're an Italian citizen or Australian citizen, whatever the case might be, yeah, you present yourself, you pay your fee, okay, like we do in Australia, and then you run your own campaign and so on and on. This way down here, you're going to have a list, and if you're not a friend of the leader of the list, then you're out of the game.
Yeah. Now, you weren't a candidate, but you were still involved officially in these elections, weren't you?
I was in the electoral committee.
Who appointed you to that committee?
Well, that's done by the consul general or the consulate, the diplomat, because my organisation, Comitato Tricolore per Italiano nel Mondo, is registered at the consulate, and only registered organisations can be called on issues like this, like being on the electoral committee. There was a few people there, so if you're registered, then you'll be called on to be part of.
And can you explain what's the function of this electoral committee?
To make sure that everything that's done, like it, we had a meeting we had a meeting on the 6th just last week. The result was, said, they told us what happened, what not happened, who got elected, how many voters. The disgusting thing is that out of 54,000 Italian citizens in Melbourne, only 1,100 people chose to vote, obviously because of the difficulties. And out of the 1,100 people, 800 something votes were valid. Okay, so when you look at it, this list was elected, say, for 401 votes, and the other one lost by 300 and whatever it is. Yeah. So
well, it was a small number of people that voted, but that's the system. But the 1,100 or 1,200 that registered were able to vote. Whether they cast a valid vote or not, then it's a matter for them. But yeah. I'm more interested in the practicalities of what it is that the Electoral Commission does with respect to the elections to Comitas.
To make sure that everything that's happened is correct.
And how does it do that?
Sorry?
How does it do that? Because as I understand it, the lists are presented to the consul.
Yes.
Yeah. The consul sends out the ballot papers.
Yes.
And I've heard of cases where, for example, people registered, but then they receive notification that they haven't quite registered and they need more information. And by the time the information is provided, the time frame has elapsed and therefore they can't be registered. Now, is the Electoral Commission involved in any aspect of that voter registration?
No.
No. So, and it's not involved in the sending out of the ballots?
No.
Is it involved in the counting of the ballots?
Indirectly, yes.
I don't understand what indirectly means.
Indirectly is that we were told that we had to, there was a number of people who wanted to be there to scrutineering or the votes. It could have been Vincent Morfoni, and there was Joe Cossari or somebody else, whatever, Cossari. And then we decided, okay, yes, we agree with that. No, we don't agree with that. Okay, at the end of the day, there was a group of people. There was some solicitors there involved, okay, who then did the counting of the votes. But we were out of it.
We being the electoral commission.
The electoral committee, yes.
Yeah. But who authorised? I think you're referring to scrutineers, basically, aren't you? To see.
Well, yeah, people that can scrutinize the vote counters, yeah.
And so both groups nominated people who.
No. They're independent.
Well, who appointed them as scrutineers?
Well, I'm not quite clear, but the Consul General gave us a number of people who said they were interested to be the vote counters, just as a simple.
All right. So again, the consul appointed the scrutineers.
No, the council provided a number of names.
And who chose?
And then we had agreed, yes, this one, no, that one, this one here, that they have no conflict of interest. They might have conflict of interest. And then.
And how many names did the consul provide?
Oh, gee, look, I don't remember, to be truthful, on how you're going to.
And how many are on the electoral commission?
There was, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
11. And was it similarly split between, you know, what you call the right and the left, or Liberal and Labor? And
well, there was the list representatives as in observers.
Right.
Okay. And there was, if you're talking left and right, was a loner, the Lone Ranger practically.
Right. And so once the ballots are counted and the scrutineers authenticate the count, what happens next? The information is passed on to the electoral commission, is it? Or
well, the electoral commission, the Consul General called us on the 6th. They said the elections were went with so many, we received so many votes, how many were illegally and not right. And at the end of the day was X amount of okay. Those of them were counted, okay. And obviously those lists are different names, and they went one way and one way the other way. And then the list who's now elected got the most votes, okay. And they explained to what happened, what was illegal, why it was illegal or was not right, okay. And there was people who voted with the wrong color pen, which can be identified as saying that Vincent voted, for argument's sake, yeah. So there's got to be a plain black and white pen, black or blue, okay, and no signs, no marks on the envelopes whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And so they counted. There's minutes to it. The minutes I have a copy of the minutes, and that was it. Then such a list won, and that one got 4. This guy's got 12, and off it went. Yeah.
But I still don't understand why it's necessary for the electoral commission effectively to declare the poll. That's what you.
And that's what we're declaring, yeah, more or less, yes.
Yeah, when all of the actual work, including the counting, is done through the consul.
No, not the consul. The consul was never present when they do the counting.
No, but
they're done at the office.
By persons who were appointed on the nomination of the consul.
Sorry?
The counting was done by people who were appointed on the nomination of the consul.
No, the consul presented the names.
Yeah.
Okay, these people who would be interested to do. Okay.
So let's say they presented 10 names.
Yes.
You could disqualify 5.
Yeah.
But you couldn't reject all of them, could you?
Of course you can.
Can you?
Yes.
Okay. And so that's where they've
got to be satisfied that the people who are present. So remember, there we are not political one way or another. We're independent group of people who make decisions on behalf of to ensure that this is correct. And what happened to date, whatever happened with the documentation, everything that we looked at was okay.
Yeah.
There was an abnormality in the first place, which I called for cancelling of the elections. And the idea was because a patronato sent electoral material to the voters with their logo and address. Okay, and that's not acceptable. Okay, as far as I was concerned, as a justice of the peace, it was a breach of the regulation.
But the consul accepted it.
No, then the group accepted it, because as far as the consulate says, the patronage is a private entity, okay, and they can do whatever they're responsible, but as far as we at the consulate says, we can't act on that. And I'm saying, well, it's not right.
Yeah, but am I right, Joe, that the Electoral Commission is nominated by the consul or approved by the consul?
No, the only way you can get an electoral commission if you're registered as a registered organisation.
Yeah, but there are many registered organisations.
No, they're not.
Aren't there? How many?
No. You can be registered in Australia as so and so and so, but you, even yourself, you should be registered with the consulate, okay, and then you would be sitting on that committee.
Well, no, but you're saying it's an organisation that's got to be registered.
Yeah, your group.
Yeah.
Okay. It has to then apply to the Italian consulate. I am so and so, so I represent so and so. I'd like to be registered on Albert on the tree or the list.
And when it comes to being appointed to the Electoral Commission, can you also self-nominate? Can you say, look, I, Joe Cossari, would like to?
No.
No.
They ask you if you want to. They send you information.
Who are they?
The consulate, because they're holding. Yeah.
So the consul asks you.
The office of the consulate. Yeah.
And you.
So would you like to participate?
And if you say yes,
you get there. If you say no, well, you're out.
Yeah. Okay. Well, given what you've said so far indicates to me that there's a great deal of dissatisfaction that you feel towards the system.
Yes.
Why then would you agree to be part of the Electoral Commission?
Well, I think that my view is you got to understand what goes on. I've never been before, and this time I decided to go, okay, to know the workings of the organisation. So now I'm a lot wiser than I was before. Okay, now I can say that the consulate, the office did what they had to do according to the regulations, inverted commas. When I raised the issue of this irregularity, it was put to a vote, and 5 against 2, because the others abstained. Yeah, and so therefore there was this disparity, but it didn't do any good, because as far as the consulate says, they didn't do anything wrong because it's done outside. It doesn't breach the Italian law. Okay, they even wrote to the Ministry of Italy, and they responded.
You did, or
no? The consulate.
The consulate.
Yes.
Okay. So clearly, you've been involved in that process for many years.
Yeah. This is the first time I participated.
No, but in one capacity.
Oh yes, I've been around for a long time. Yes.
No. And I'd like you to tell us, if you could, over those years, what are the main success stories, if you call them that, of Comites? What has Comites actually contributed towards the Italian community in Australia, and what are some of its achievements?
To be truthful, I can't remember any achievements. All I've shown is that things have been spoken about. But in local government, we raise the issues and then we get responses and there's action. Okay. In the past, when I was involved, there really was zero action.
And well, again, that raises the question: why would you continue to be involved?
Just to know, knowledge.
Yeah. And maybe were you aware of what the platform of the two groups was?
No.
Well, how would the voters know? And
well, they supposedly communicated, and this is where the whole thing goes back again. I will promote the Italian culture. I will do this, all that sort of stuff. And I'm saying you've been doing it for the last 30 years and nothing has changed. Why do you keep repeating the same story? But nobody listens to you.
Yeah.
So it's really a waste of time. I'm telling you, I would, if I was elected, I would go in and go better to hell to cancel this comitas, give it a different mandate, and something that's going to be constructive.
But like doing what? What sort of things?
Well, I think let's look at the new arrivals in Australia, inverted commas, yeah? These holiday workers, okay, who pay superannuation but are entitled to take it away, who at the last, what's the name, this was COVID, these were left behind. What about, I don't remember exactly what happened when Australia decided that people from working holiday visas from England were okay, from Germany were okay, and some Asian country, and they didn't mention Italy. Why aren't we saying, what happened to the Italians?
It wasn't one of the constituents of the group, one of the groups, comprised of young people who fill that category? Isn't it NOMIT or whatever?
And NOMIT is a group that's, I really don't know about the successes either. But obviously they got in there and wanted to be in there to bring some new blood in the system. My view is, again, I'm going to say, and I'll say quite clearly, you can't have, there's a gentleman there, because I can't say names, okay, who's been there for about 35 years.
Well, yeah, surely.
Okay? Not even a dictator in Africa stays that long.
I think most people would agree with you that renewal of boards is a good thing.
But you can't have a renewal when the dominant party or group.
No, well, you could really. I mean, all the Italian government has to do is to say no one can be a member of Comites for longer than 2 terms.
Yeah, but you see what they manipulate it, because at the moment, if you've been there for such a long time, you can't be as a member of the Patronato, you can't be in there, okay? But they apart 2 people that I'm aware of, 3 people are from the Patronato. They're in there.
Well, you may need to expect. Well, that may need to be taken up with the actual government in Italy, I would have thought, rather than
here. Of course. Yeah. But it's really a farce, to be truthful. I'm sorry to the listeners, if there is any. It's a farce. We've got to change. We do need a group like this to represent us, but not the way it is.
But that's the issue that I have, right? If you see it as a farce and you concede it's a farce, why do you keep participating?
Yeah, but because now I can speak about it. I can speak about it, and confirms what I've been thinking all along. I'm a person for change, and that change is not coming. And now the other thing that we need to do is, and has to be done, and to the listeners, this is a message to the listeners. If you guys shift from one household to another, inform the consulate that you shifted, that you got a new address, so they can send you the communication, and you have a voice. At the moment, you haven't got that voice.
But Joe, maybe you need to accept the reality that of the people that vote, their choice is evident in the victor.
Yeah, now the voters at this moment here, they're the friends
and in the past.
Yeah, they're the friends, they're only the friends. They collected signatures, and here is something quite serious, during COVID for their list. Yeah. Okay, they must have went to their homes, and it was illegal.
We don't know what they did. I mean, emails.
But it's evidence that they couldn't collect them the addresses of somebody living in Wanturna when you're allowed only 5 Ks.
All right. So far we've discussed comites, we've discussed the Oceania. And were you also a member of is it the CGE?
Consider no,
because that's another body that's meant to represent.
Another body. There's the one, and there the guy from CGE, Consiglio Generale Italiano All'Estero, he's been there for close to 40 years, and he's now running again.
You've not there. And I think at one stage, were you not also a consultore for Calabria?
Sorry?
Were you not also a consultore for Calabria at one stage?
I was appointed by the Comitato Tricolore per Italiano Le Monde to represent it in the Consulta Calabrese.
And when was that?
Again, should have asked me beforehand a few years ago. It'd be
Yeah.
over 20 odd years.
Yeah. And I take it you participated in the consulta?
Every meeting that I had, I
Yeah.
participated.
And you went to Calabria for the meetings?
Yes.
And do you, and it seems to me that in theory, the consulta is meant to effect the, again, communication of the situation in Australia or Victoria or whatever it
Yes.
happens to be,
Yes.
to on this occasion to the regional government.
Yeah.
And how do you say the consulta? Well, you say you were appointed by
Yes.
the Movimento
Tricolore, yeah.
Tricolore. Was that from the regional government or from the national government? I'm not
It
sure.
would have been from Tremalia.
Directly.
Yeah.
But how could he appoint you to the consulta
Because,
of the Calabrian government?
Because groups like that can be appointed as observers, more or less. To those
So
meetings.
I understood that the consulta was actually an advisory body to the president of
The
Calabria.
region. Yes.
Yeah.
So I was an observer. I wasn't appointed by the region.
So the national government could or did appoint you as an observer to.
Yeah, but even as a patronato, you can be as an observer to the system.
Oh, okay. Well, then why hasn't the current regime appointed you?
Because the current regime has a different color.
Well, I don't know. Well,
Not the current, sorry, the previous.
Yeah. Well, even the previous regime was part of the Forza Italia. The president,
hang on. Let's talk about Calabria or the national government.
Well, okay. So you're saying, well, to talk with the national government, you were appointed, you say, many years ago.
Yeah.
But the Lega, which is or was part of the government and was on the right wing.
Yeah, but I wasn't part of the Lega.
No, but weren't you part of the party that was affiliated with the Lega?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So again, why wouldn't they have appointed you?
I got no idea.
Did you ask them?
No.
Why wouldn't you?
Because sometimes you say you've got to give it up and let somebody else be in there.
Well, yeah, but you see, I think what you've told us indicates that you're a person who wants change.
Yes.
And wants to see renewal. And if that's your belief, why wouldn't you say, if effectively your party's in power, why wouldn't you be saying to them, look, appoint me because I want to achieve.
I understand. So let me go back. I got documentation that I applied to be, and because I wasn't in those cases down here, I know they changed the rules. I had to be, supported by a list or a group, a Calabrian group in Australia or in Victoria to be nominated as a consultore. They wrote to me and I couldn't be bothered answering back to them because I had nobody. With the current regime as it is, as you're probably aware, I will never have a chance of being there. Yeah. At the moment, the whole thing is at the same time as it is now. And I've spoken to you about this, and you know, we don't want to go down that track.
What about currently? I mean, now
the situation is quite different. Yeah. I now represent, inverted commas, politically, the current government of Italy, of Calabria.
And have you asked?
The Lega, we got Forza Italia, the Lega and Fratelli d'Italia. Oh, sorry, it's Forza Italia, Fratelli d'Italia, and La Lega.
Yeah. And have you asked the government to appoint you?
I've had they've called me a number of occasions, and I had a discussion last night, that they want to change. They want to change with a different way of doing things because they're not satisfied the way it's been going for the last 20 years.
When you say they called you, can you indicate the person who called you?
I'm sorry, I can't do that.
Right. But it's someone within the government.
Someone within the government.
Yeah. And did they indicate what sort of change they desire?
Well, certainly their view is that everybody goes there and they keep talking about, you know, I had the Festa Sant'Antonio, San Francesco, and all that sort of stuff. There's got to be more constructive. I know there's a group that you probably are aware, you probably are part of it, that is more or less on the legal side of things. And it would be my favorite to be one of those, if I have a say, one of those groups that have a consultora in Calabria.
Well, I think the group you're talking about is the Australian Calabrese Cultural Association. And,
that's exactly right.
And we certainly
but certainly I wouldn't
hold dinner parties, but in fact, as I understand it, we were the first group to organise an international conference.
That's correct.
In Cosenza in 2019, leaving that aside. But what interests me is, the process, because I'm beginning to think that there's what might be called an official process, and then in the background, an unofficial process, because if people are writing to you, then they should be really communicating with all of the associations.
No, they will be communicating. And I've said this, is that the discussion was, and still is, we don't want anyone that comes in and says, oh, I cook for pasta for 30 people, for argument's sake. There's going to be more constructive representation. So the question is, I could be asked to say, Joe, who do you think? Because I am part of it. And I'll say, well, there's a group that I think is worthy of having that position that will contribute to what you are looking for. Not somebody that has a festa for... No,
but I don't think that the government appoints a group. I think it's got to be an individual. But leaving that aside, but you raise another issue, of course, and that is that there are a large number of associations or clubs in, yes, in Victoria and in Australia. And some of them, I think, do fulfill a useful function in the sense if their members want to meet socially. Yes. I think that's a perfectly legitimate goal,
we're
right?
Not saying, we're not saying that's not okay, but we need more to represent the region, and we need more information that the region can react. We want to talk about commerce, cultural exchanges, serious cultural exchanges that at the moment is not really happening.
Yeah, and you're a member of one of the associations. You're a member of the Philadelphia Association. Yes. And what does it do?
Well, it does, as you're probably aware that you were present at one of our general meeting, for argument's sake, and we talked about, I tried to talk, and unless because I wasn't allowed to talk long, is about the culture, the identity of Calabria.
But the meeting I attended, it was a lunch at which you spoke, and I'd spoken and tried to say something about the consulta. But other than that sort of social function, which I think it's a legitimate activity, right? That, unlike a lot of people. From what I've seen, I don't think that the Philadelphia Association has done much.
No, the Philadelphia Association hasn't done no more, no less than any other group of Calabrian organisations. So we want to jump out of that.
Well, effectively, what you're saying is that irrespective of how these associations have been operating in the past, in order for a consultora to be nominated by them, they've got to show that they're carrying out activities beyond merely social.
Yes, the activities, since I come into this meeting tonight, I suggested, because obviously there's no use using the same system, you having a little festa here, a little festa there, and all that sort of stuff. I said, why don't we have a Calabrian Week festival? Okay, so now they're working, the group has decided to pick it up and are working somewhere just before Easter, after Easter next year, to have this a Calabrian Week festa.
And well, then I would imagine that you'd be working behind the scenes to try and get appointed as a consultor.
Well, most likely I will be appointed, most likely. But I'm working before this happened about creating the week festival, a Calabrian festival, at abroad, inviting everybody and not just a few little clubs here and there. So I work for that. And if I get appointed or done, it doesn't really matter. I don't crave that I have to be, but I certainly would like to give an input.
Yeah. Well, it remains to be seen, because as I understand that it's a fairly complex process in the way that they go about appointing these people. And it will be interesting if you do get a direct appointment, because if that were to happen, in my view, that would be a breach of the law under which the consulta operates, because the consulta says that it's got to be, the law says it's got to be appointed on the nomination of one of the associations.
Yeah, well, I can ask you to nominate me for your group.
Well, I can't guarantee any of that, Joe.
See, I just threw that as a red herring, yeah?
Yeah. In a sense, the group is apolitical, and if people think that they want to ask for support, I've got to say there's no guarantee that it's going to be forthcoming.
Yeah, but you see, what we're doing now, you and I, this is political. If you're talking about parties, that becomes political. But politics is about discussion and arriving at conclusions.
It's one thing about having a discussion on issues, and hopefully the people who ultimately are appointed to positions might use whatever information is made available to better the condition of the Italians and the Calabrese in Australia. But it's another thing to effectively try to use what is an apolitical situation for political purposes, in my view. And I don't.
Well, this is not a, now. That's
and that won't allow itself to be done.
Now you're picking on me. I'm not using my.
No, I'm not picking on you. I'm just telling you that.
Yeah, I understand, but I don't know. I've sent you my CV. I've got a lot of experience that I could be useful, whether I'm in or outside. If I'm not inside, that's fine. And then what I like to see is the consultore have a chat with me, and let's work in together.
I think that there's a lot of scope for more cooperation. I agree with you, and maybe you differ, but one of my views is that one of the greatest failings, both at the for the Calabrese community and indeed for the broader Italian community, is that there isn't the level of cooperation that exists in other communities, and that might be a function of the Italian personality, and that's how it is. But hopefully, with younger people coming in with less history of the Italian system, they might be able to cooperate better in the future.
Well, yeah, look, I think, look, I've got utmost respect for you. We've known each other for a long time. I think we need to create that change. And it's difficult to create a change with the current situation. We want a different type of people, representation at the consulta, who will be able to talk to our community at large, encourage them to be more involved and maintain our culture alive and well, and do have what we should be doing is working with a business over there and business over here. We should be talking about exchange students and things like that, something constructive, which could be useful for our community.
Well, I've got to say, as you know, I was a consultore for 12 months.
Yeah.
Basically. And
you still are, hypothetically, until they
appoint, they appoint a new one. And I've got to say that there has been an attempt to communicate and give information. And what I've found is that, in fact, the majority of people are happy to just go along.
That's right.
And most of them often see it as an intrusion. If you bring up and say, look, we're doing this and we're doing that, and that's a problem. And I think the greatest issue is that a lot of our young people don't see any great utility. I've got to say,
and they haven't got a position. They've got no say, and they're being left out.
Well, it goes beyond the fact that they don't have a say. It goes to the fact that they don't know how the process operates,
That's right.
right?
Well, you know, no communication again.
Well, but depending on what's reading. So anyway, it depends on what happens when the president of Calabria finally decides that either
Yeah. At the moment, I think it's at a far distance. Look, we go back to the same thing. I know that you've tried and you got my utmost supporter because I admire and I like what you're doing and how you're doing it. I'm not happy the way things are going from the other side. You know who I'm talking about.
It's not,
and so therefore, you know, you and I, if we could affect change of some sort, it'd be a great.
I don't think it's about individuals, Joe, and I don't think that it'd be a good thing to devolve into another group situation like comitees. I think that's that would be a retrograde step. But anyway, we'll see. But what I'd like to, and you're a man who effectively at one level or another has been involved in both local and national politics in Australia and in the politics of Italy for many years. What's been your biggest achievement that you would say during that period?
Well, my achievements, I can only count the achievements where I've had the opportunity to do so. I've been vocal a lot of times with the comites and CGA and so on, and the way things are going in Italy, and about who's been elected, who's not been elected, because you know you need that sort of stuff. In local government, I think I've done quite a lot. The record is there. I created things like multicultural festivals. I got all the cultural groups in Knox all together to work together, and it's been a great achievements. I've done so in Ringwood. I've supported and things that happen in Ringwood, and now Ringwood is now becoming the hub of the eastern suburbs. Some of the ideas have come to fruition in Ringwood. The Ringwood Piazza was me that pushed it, and eventually it came about. Things like that are important for our community at large. So as far as Italy is concerned, I've always had the voice and had tried to get things going, but the politics in Italy, as you know, have been not like Australia. It's very difficult in many cases. Tremaglia is gone, and so the pin of all these overseas Italians has gone. We now I've got a guy called, who was a parliamentarian from Trieste, Roberto Menia, who's actually taking more or less the position of Tremaglia. He's working together to get the community or the Comitato Tricolore del Mondo to be more active and more representative of our community at large. But again, not being in government and being in opposition is not easy to achieve. What I like to do is listen and ask the Italian community in Australia, or in Victoria in this case down here, is to give us feedbacks on how or what they would like from us to promote. Because no use me getting up in the morning and dream off that I want to go to the moon. I need the input. With that input, we can achieve. If we don't have that participation, we're not going to achieve anything anywhere.
And conversely, what would you regard as your greatest disappointment in that political life?
Me personally, as in politics?
You personally, yeah.
In local politics?
Well, in your political life generally, I mean.
Yeah, look, I think that I represented my communities reasonably well. I've achieved quite a great issues. I've also been the first overseas person. I was the first overseas mayor in the eastern suburbs, and I was the first in the whole of Australia to challenge the state governments on local government. So I could run for 2 governments, and I've got my, proudly or otherwise, my name at Hansard.
So is that indicating that you don't have any disappointments? Because
no, I don't really have any disappointments. No. When I come to the point, and this is who I am, I was in Knox. I could have been elected another time. I said, Joe, you've been here long enough. Give somebody else a chance. And I left.
Well, that's true. Although you're still in there though, battling away.
I'm battling for. Yeah. I'm a firm believer that we should have more say. We've got to be but the Italians to be better recognised, be present, work hard, all
Well,
that sort of stuff, yeah?
I would have expected you to say that one of your disappointments is that you haven't actually been appointed consultor.
Oh,
No?
why isn't it?
Yeah.
As I said, you know, it's not the end of the world.
Are you going to stand for the next election to the Italian Parliament?
Okay. At the moment,
It's early days.
at the moment, I am the next candidate of the Italian elections from Fratelli d'Italia, or the group that forms.
You're the next, sorry, chair.
Sorry?
You're the next chair, did you say?
The next candidate
Oh, okay.
of Fratelli d'Italia.
So at the next election,
Yeah.
you'll be a candidate for
Yes.
Fratelli d'Italia
That's
for
right.
the Oceania
That's correct.
electorate.
Yes.
Okay. Well,
And if I'm elected, there'll certainly be a change in the commenters. There'll certainly be a change in a lot of things.
yeah, well, all
And
we
of
can,
course, I still seek advice, even for a person called Vincent Morfoni.
well, you know, we're there to serve. There are many other people, I think, that would be repositories of knowledge that you might be using.
Remember, we were together in NIAF, remember?
Yeah, we were. All right. Well, look, all we can say is good luck with the election,
Thank you.
whenever it is. And thank you very much for sharing some of your thoughts.
Thank you very much
today.
for having me on your program, I suppose.
Yeah.
I've tried to answer your questions as best as I could at the time. It's all done. I haven't read about it, just out of my memory.
No.
And so therefore, you know, I hope I've represented you well, but I want, before we close, I ask everyone who's an Italian citizen to inform the consulate where you live. If you change the address, tell them, because you need to have a say.
Yeah.
Remember, when you're having a say on behalf of Australia as well.
Thank you. And I need to wind up by saying again that the Australian Calabrese Cultural Association is an apolitical and a not-for-profit organisation that doesn't support any particular party. And
I understand that very well, and I admire you highly, and I recommend people to join your group. Please join his group. It's an excellent group.
Thanks very much, Joe.